My name is Dennis Colomi. We're going to take a look at some best practices and tools and techniques that we've designed to sort of help dealerships close more of their internet leads, and most importantly, make sure that they're doing it at a profitable basis, which means the profit should be equal to or greater than the profits for the walk-in traffic at the same store. We realize today that most dealerships probably close an average of about 5 to 7% of all their internet leads, and that's taking a combination between all leads that come from their website, from third-party vendors, from all sources that they get across the board, putting them through a process of sending out emails, phone calls to schedule appointments, and actually wind up burning gas and driving away in vehicles at your store. So we're going to show you some of the best practices that we've been able to help dealerships get closing ratios of 20, 23%, and sometimes more based on that. And so hopefully some of these techniques will help you in your endeavors at your dealership. So again, we call this performance coaching, and it's through Autobytel. We love to have your interactions. We'll go through this, and hopefully it'll be great. Now, one thing we need to share with you guys is to clearly understand that performance coaching is not about how to sell cars. We know that at your dealerships that's part of your daily routine, and we know that's what you know how to do. But what this is about is principally showing you and understanding the concept and the psychology of the internet customer. What is it going to take to win them? And most importantly, it's about getting these people to the showroom floor so you guys can do what you do best and do it efficiently. When we look at a dealership and we look at measuring performance coaching, we actually measure it by 5 criteria. And the first one is what process do you have? Which emails do you send out? When do you send them out to get the customers to want to like you, trust you, and leave them wanting more? So we realize that emails don't sell cars, but we do need to incorporate a series of events to get people, again, engaged with you from that standpoint forward. So we'll look much deeper into what processes work and what's the technique and the psychology to get the people to like you, to trust you, and leave them wanting more. The second part, and it's a much more complex part in our industry, has to do with what we call making the appointment. And there's 3 aspects that we look at when we study the making the appointment process. First of all, it's how many calls do we make before we give up. Today we realize, based on call centers that do multi-million calls to try to get people on the phone, it actually takes an average of 9.1 attempts before you reach a physical person. Today, because we have such busy lifestyles of caller ID, voicemail, call screening, and what happens to people's lives today, it's much more challenging than it ever has been to get that person on the phone. So one, we want to make sure that nobody at our dealership ever quits before we've made at least 9 attempts to reach that person within the first 3 weeks of the prospect's life. If we've made 9 attempts, and some of those are messages, some of them might be hang-ups, and the person's not calling us back, or they're not returning the phone calls, whatever that happens to be, it's not that they're not buying a Honda, they just may not be buying a Honda today. So we realize that that's a concentrated effort, but nothing happens until we make that first attempt. The second part of making the appointment is what time of day are we making the phone calls? What we find in most cases at a dealership, a lot of the phone calls are being made at 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning because it's convenient to the sales staff. It's after they get out of their meeting and before they start getting busy with the customers. But it's a low percentage play because the customers are either tied up at work or caught in the meetings themselves. We have less results being made because the time of day, the phone calls, is not the greatest yield for us. We encourage dealerships to try to have phone calls being made later in the afternoon or early evening, but the challenge becomes much greater because that's when most salespeople are busy with a customer. In many cases, we encourage the dealership to hire an appointment setter, which is someone that generally can use a script, which we'll take a look at a little later in the presentation, and incorporate some of the psychology and the aspects of making that appointment as a favor or as an assistant to the people who are selling cars. So again, we want to put people where they're more efficient. The more I can put the salespeople where they're face-to-face with people, the more money they make, the more money the dealership makes, the more successful that we all become. On an appointment setter, many of the statistics that we look at is they'll call 60 phone calls per day. They're only going to talk to 6.7 prospects. They'll make 3.5 appointments a day. They'll make 70 appointments per month, providing they work full-time. And you should get between 20 and 28 car deals from their efforts. So if they make 70 appointments, 35 people show up, and that's sort of the nature. 35 people show up, and you should sell between 20 and 28 car deals. So again, making the appointment is three parts. Number one, how many calls do we make before we give up? Number two, what time of day we making the phone calls? And number three is, what do we say when we get on the phone? What do we say when we get on the phone? Those are the combination of things that we really need to focus. The third one is really about your script, the dialogue, the relationship, and being able to stay off of price and availability and create a relationship and find out what's most important to the customer. We're going to get into those three aspects when we look at more details on Make the Appointment here in a few minutes. The third piece is about mastering your response time. It's ironic, but national statistics are showing us that the speed of the response is equal to the relationship you create with a customer. It's also equal to the gross profit you experience on the sale. So we know it's very important to respond to these people somewhere between 11 and 30 minutes on average. And we'll talk about techniques in a few minutes that we do to help reduce that on a daily basis or hourly basis so that we can get that down and perform well. We realize it's not easy. It's a chore. But if we keep getting better every month and improving that as a goal and as part of our initiative for the store, you'll see that it is. But the stores that close the highest closing ratios will have closing ratios attributed to a response time of somewhere between 10 and 30 minute average. So we'll look at that in a few minutes as well. The fourth item I think it's important for us to take a look at is to squeeze every nickel out of the leads that you do get. The average time frame between the time a new car lead comes into your store and the time that person actually buys a car is a period of about 91 days. And we know that that time frame is a critical key component to the success behind your entire program. Is what ability do we have to keep our name and our face in front of the customer? Think in terms of in the old days in the car business, we used to have a phrase that we said, person comes into your dealership, they're buying a car within 72 hours. Well, part of that is still true, but it doesn't apply when you first receive an internet lead to the dealership. You kind of take a look at a husband and wife situation. A guy decides, based on a commercial that he sees on TV, that he's thinking about an F-150. He's taking a look at the F-150 on TV, loves the truck. He doesn't say anything to his wife. He doesn't mention anything to her. He goes into kind of read some stuff online. He probably sends an internet lead into the dealership. Well, the next day, he probably drives to one of the dealerships at the way home from work, and he'll come in and he'll see the salesman will greet him, and he'll say, look, I'm not here to buy a car. All I want is a brochure. Walks past the salesman to the showroom floor, gets a brochure, goes home, and reads the thing from cover to cover. You're still calling, trying to get an appointment with him, all the rest of the information. Well, that next Saturday morning, he's probably sitting at the breakfast table, drinking his orange juice and reading his newspaper. He leans over to his wife and he says, honey, I'm thinking about getting one of those F-150s. And those guys that are on the other end of this call that are married probably knows how that conversation might go. It's not just guys. I guess the girls on the call might know how it would probably go as well. There's probably a great deal of dialogue around there, but it probably goes something like, honey, there's no way you're getting an F-150. Besides, nothing's happening until you promise me the new bedroom furniture that you have, and you got to paint the Finch, and absolutely nothing's going to happen until you clean out the garage. So months and months go by. We're trying to call the guy to get him in for an appointment. He's not returning our phone calls. He's not answering. He's still interested in an F-150. About another week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, maybe a month or 2 months goes by, and he's able to convince his wife to come to the dealership on a Sunday to look at the window stickers. He comes by on Sunday to look at the window stickers, and then about 3 or 4 days later, they wind up showing up into the showroom floor. We believe wholeheartedly that the shelf life of a purchase request is not uncommon for it to be a full 2-year period of time. And if it takes 2 years to paint the fence and to get new bedroom furniture before he can convince his wife to get that F-150, what are we doing as a dealership group to stay in front of them to make sure that we're earning every last dime out of that internet lead that you pay for? So we encourage dealerships to set up a short-term and long-term email follow-up process. So we'll take a look in a few minutes about what we expect the first day. But beyond that, we would love to have you guys incorporate a series of emails that go out from day 3, day 5, day 10, day 14, day 20, day 24. And those emails all the way up to day 45 should have a distinct purpose within that phrase to somehow engage that customer into a response and get them to respond or get them to acknowledge or communicate with us. Some of those emails will come out from an internet manager, some will come out from a dealer principal, some will come out from a testimonial, previous customers, some will come out as an incentive. But sometimes these messages are very appropriate to engage these people into some form of a process, and we'll talk a little bit more about those in a few minutes. Beyond that 45-day period, if a person hasn't responded, we'll just assume that they're still interested in an F-150, and for whatever reason they've decided to hold off, either for their tax return or for the inheritance check or to paint the fence or whatever it happens to be. We encourage you to send a weekly special to every prospect that you have, Wednesday at 12 noon, because that's higher readership, sets up Thursday, Friday, Saturday appointments. And that email would have some kind of a message like, don't forget to turn your clocks back, safety tips for the kids for Halloween, happy holidays from our family of years, happy Thanksgiving, this day in history, baseball was invented, all kinds of fun things along with special of the week and perhaps a recipe. And the recipes are somewhat engaging, and people look forward to seeing some samples that you guys might have to share with your customer base. Of course, these always have to have opt-out principles built into the emails, but they have relatively high readership. But most importantly, you're not just in their face by saying, buy a car from me, buy a car from me. You're sending them something of value and something that's a little bit more sincere on a weekly basis. So these are great concepts that we found, and we found that by that type of a follow-up, you will get about 7% of a bump into your closing ratios because it will reach those people at the time that they're physically convenient and ready. And we realize that you can't expect to have your salespeople call people well beyond that time frame and get any high percentage closing ratios. So the follow-up is important to do that. And last but not least is inspect what you expect. We realize when you take a deeper look at all of the aspects of this that the percentages of what should apply and the aspect of managing your expectations and making sure that there's reasonable levels of what we comprehend in that is also equally important. So when we dive further into that, we're going to look at what the three different ways to operate your internet department. One would be just an internet manager that's hired from start to finish, being able to manage those leads from start to finish. How many leads is the appropriate number for them to have. We'll take a look at the different aspect, which is what we call all sales, where there's someone that manages and distributes the leads to your salespeople, the do's and the don'ts and positive and negatives of that process. And the third most common that we would see would be a BDC or internet department. Sometimes we call them a CDC, Customer Development Center, where they actually take the leads, communicate with them through email and telephone, bring them into the dealership to turn them over to a salesman to create that sale. So we'll look at the pros and cons of those into inspect what you expect and talk about what the advantages or disadvantages might be to any one of the dealerships and how to be able to maximize the opportunities and eliminate some of the objections that may occur across the board. So this concludes the section 1 of the webinar. That's about 15 minutes into it. There'll be 4 sections in total. Thank you for your time, and we look forward to sharing some stuff with you on section 2.